Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel for another quick champion guide, and today we are taking a look at Nico Minoru. Now, Nico is still very new to the game, but in my personal opinion, she is already in the conversation for best Mystic Champ in MCOC. She is currently the only 7-star champion in the game with access to the buff immunity effect, which makes her incredibly strong against almost any cosmic champ and in any fight where buff prevention is necessary, but the defender or the fight nodes prevent you from using typical Mystic stuff like Nullify or Stagger or Fate Seal. Now, before we jump into the guide, let's answer the question that we usually start off these guides with, and that is, does Nico need to be awakened? Now, truthfully, I kind of went back and forth on this one, and I am going to lean towards a yes here because the SIG does have a direct impact on her damage output, as you're going to see in a moment here. SIG level's very nice to have, not required to be high SIG, and you do get some immediate value even at the initial awakening. Alright, let's take a look at her signature ability here. There are 3 parts to it, and the first part is the one that directly affects her damage output. It says that whenever a buff or personal effect other than poison is prevented or removed by an immunity, she inflicts a poison passive, and the potency of this poison passive is going to scale with her SIG level. So Nico applies a buff immunity effect on her special 2, just like Clairvoyant does, and you can apply buffs to the opponent using your heavy attack and your third light. So what the dupe is going to do for her is allow her to apply these passive poisons every time you attempt to place a buff while the buff immunity is active, or when the defender attempts to gain a buff while that buff immunity is active. So you get some very good damage from these poison passives at SIG 20, and it scales very well. At SIG 200, the potency is roughly like double of what it is at First Awakening. You can see mine here is at SIG 100, but even if you just get her at SIG 20, she's still going to dish out a lot more damage at SIG 20 than she would be doing unduped. Now, the second part of the SIG, you get immediately after awakening. It says that her effects are going to be paused during her special attack. So effects here includes her poison debuffs, which are from her special 2, the buff immunity, the poison passes from the first part of her SIG. Nico, of course, is a Mystic. Mystics like spamming specials, so having these effects paused during her special attacks, which you're going to be using a lot of, is a very good thing for her in the long run. Now, lastly, the third part of her SIG is where she's going to gain some survivability. So when she causes an attack to miss, she will gain adrenaline. So what this means is that a chunk of adrenaline will actually be added to her health bar, and then you can convert that adrenaline back into health by dealing damage to the opponent. So Nico can trigger invisibility on her special 1. This is going to give her a very short window in which she can cause the defender to miss, which means you'll have several opportunities throughout a fight to net positive health, which is always a good thing. Perhaps the best thing about this is that since this healing is done via adrenaline, adrenaline's unaffected by regen rate modifications, so things like Spectre, things like Petrify, and it's also unaffected by heal block. So there is essentially nothing that your opponent can do or a node can do that can stop you from healing via the adrenaline mechanic, which makes her very unique across all characters in the game. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump right into the gameplay. Alright, the very first thing that you need to know about Nico is her heavy attack. Whenever Nico gains at least 5% adrenaline, she will also gain a Fury passive, and the easiest way to do this is by utilizing her heavy attack, which converts 7% of her current health into adrenaline. The second thing you want to know is that charging her heavy and using her third light attack will place pentacle buffs on the opponent. Now, these buffs don't actually do anything, but anytime the defender gains this or any other kind of buff, Nico will passively gain power herself, so this is very important in making sure that she always has a special to use. Now, the real key to using Nico is learning how to balance her heavy attack with her basic attacks. You want those Fury passives for the damage, but in non-ideal matchups, you also really want to be placing as many buffs as you can via her third light attack, and you'll see why in just a second. Now, at the start of the fight, I always like to lead with a heavy attack to get my damage going right away. From here, I use basic attacks and apply as many pentacle buffs as I can while I build up to 2 bars of power. And again, it's really important here to try your best to weave in heavies where you can in order to build up more of those Fury passives. Now, once you're at 2 bars of power, you want to heavy cancel into the special 2. The heavy cancel is going to grant you a Zeal passive, and this will prevent your adrenaline from expiring naturally. The Special 2 itself is going to apply a poison debuff on every hit, and then on the final hit it's going to apply a buff immunity debuff. This effect will immediately remove all the Pinnacle buffs and any other buffs on the defender, and if your Nico is awakened, all of these buffs will be turned into poison passives. It's also worth pointing out here that against Cosmic champs who are immune to poison, she will instead apply Acid Burn, which currently no one in the game is immune to. Now at this point your goal is to keep the buff immunity debuff up for the rest of the fight, and you can refresh it by using any special attack. Remember to balance your heavies to keep those Fury passives up alongside basic attacks to apply even more Pentacle buffs, add additional poison passives. If your Nico is unduped, you still want to use those basic attacks because remember, you're going to be gaining power whenever the opponent gains a buff, so this is going to help you spam your special attacks. Build up to your Special 1, let it rip. In addition to refreshing the buff immunity, the Special 1 is also going to deal a burst of damage for every damaging effect on the defender. This includes her poisons and any other effects that may exist from a node. Now the Special 1 will also trigger invisibility, and this is incredibly helpful for keeping the opponent cornered. Oftentimes they'll fire their special attack right into it, and you can just sit there and laugh and then spam a few heavies in the corner to get even more Fury passives. Now there is a cooldown on the invisibility, so make sure that you're paying attention to the timer on her side of the screen, because if the last hit fires and that cooldown timer is not gone, the invisibility will not trigger and you'll be open for a counterattack. From here on, you can just continue to spam Special 1 until the fight is over. Alright, let's go ahead and look at a fight in real time. This is on the CCB beta. We have a Venompool here with 1.3 million health. So a longer fight than the ones I've shown so far. So start of the fight, again, I like to start with a heavy attack just to get the Furies going. Sometimes you can get that dash-in basic attack to work, sometimes you can't. Again, weaving in basic attacks with the heavy attack, we want to balance those Pinnacle buffs with our Fury passives. I didn't use any of the pre-fights here, so we're going to go ahead and start off with a Special 2. That turns all of his buffs, all of our buffs, into poisons, passives. We've got poisons from the Special 2, and now we are cooking with the damage. Going to go in here with a Striker, and then we're going to heavy cancel into the Special 1 that gets us our Zeal passive, and we're going to get some nice burst damage here off the Special 1 as well. Now he doesn't play ball with the special attack into the invisibility, so we just heavy him anyways. We can heavy counter his heavy attack, and just kind of cycling special attacks. Again, the goal here is really just to keep that buff immunity going for the rest of the fight, because every time we place a buff or he attempts to get one, that's an additional poison passive that's going to be placed on him. Now it's kind of like, you know, there's a lot of numbers flying by, and they, you know, they don't look like a lot, but we are dealing a lot of damage. Remember, 1.3 million health opponent here. Fire off the Special 1. Invisibility is off cooldown. This time he throws the special attack into the invisibility, so we can follow up with a couple of nice heavies. One more heavy attack cancel into the Special 1, and I think this burst damage just about clears him. One more Special 1, and a couple of basic attacks finish him off. 1.3 million health in just under 90 seconds. She had total control of that fight, and excellent damage to boot. Alright, real quick, let's review the rotation at a glance here. Again, I like to start with a heavy attack just to get that Fury passive up right away. Charging your heavy is also going to place a Pinnacle buff, and again, you want those in order to get poisons later. From there, you want to mix your heavy attacks with your basic attacks. Remember that your third light attack is going to place a Pinnacle buff, so when you're using a basic combo, you always want to do at least 4 hits. From there, build up to 2+ bars of power. Use your Special 2, that's going to apply the buff immunity debuff that will remove all of the Pinnacle buffs and any buffs that are on the defender, convert them into poison if your Nico is duped. If you heavy cancel into the Special 2, that gets you that Zeal passive, that prevents your adrenaline from decaying, that's going to increase your survivability over the course of the fight. And then from there, just Special 1 spam for the burst damage. Again, you get damage for every damaging effect on the defender, so the more poisons you have stacked, the more damage that special attack is going to do. The Special 1 will also trigger the invisibility. You can use that to get easy heavy openings if they launch a special into it. If you let them hit into your miss, you also gain adrenaline, again, if your Nico is duped, so you can net positive health by doing that. And then remember, any special attack is going to refresh the buff immunity. So if a situation arises where you get too much power and you push yourself back up to the special 2 or even the special 3, it's totally fine. Just let it rip and the buff immunity will be at full strength when you come back. Okay, the next thing that we should talk about are Nico's pre-fights, which are an essential part of her kit in many matchups. She has a total of 4 available, and before we discuss them, it's important for you to know that although she can use all 4 on one fight, she can only use each pre-fight once per quest, and she has no way to get them back during a quest. So in Battlegrounds, this won't be an issue because you can just choose whichever one you want at the start of the fight, but in a questing scenario or in Alliance War or in AQ, you really need to plan ahead, because if you waste a pre-fight on a fight and need it later, you're just out of luck. Now, the most important pre-fight here is the first one, which allows her to start the fight with her buff immunity debuff already applied to the defender. So against an opponent like Gore, for example, this is going to immediately convert all of his starting buffs into poisons if you have her awakened. And this is going to speed her ramp considerably, because with the buff immunity already active, you don't really need to go to the special 2 unless your Nico is unduped. You can just continue to spam special 1s to keep it refreshed for the duration of the fight. Now, the next pre-fight here is going to give her increased adrenaline while blocking, and you're going to want to use this in any fight where you think you'll be taking an excessive amount of chip damage through your block. Nico converts a percentage of all damage taken into adrenaline, and this is going to significantly increase that amount. So really helpful for somebody like Serpent or any stun immune fight where you're going to have to be baiting a lot of heavy attacks. Now, the third one gives you immunity to poison and rupture, and I can tell you with near certainty that this was probably designed for that hazard shift node on the Alliance War map. But beyond that, it does give her a pretty big advantage against science champions, where rupture is usually found. So against a champ like Spot or Spider-Punk, these champions can place ruptures on you, and in matchups where you think she should have a disadvantage, getting immunity to rupture is actually a huge deal. So it makes her a very versatile attacker. And then finally, the last one changes her damage over time type from poison to incinerate. So this one you would use for a non-cosmic poison immune champ, like a robot, for example, or even some members of the science class that we just mentioned a minute ago. Now, the trade-off for this kind of damage replacement is that your incinerates will only deal 70% of the damage that the poisons would have dealt, but pretty fair, because having that type of versatility again makes her very useful for a wider variety of defenders in the game. Now, usually I don't cover synergies in these guides. However, this is relevant. Nico actually does have access to a 5th pre-fight via her synergy with Carolina Dean, and it's worth mentioning because it's actually very, very good. So this spell gives Nico an ability that works very similar to how Prowler works, where every time the defender uses a special attack, Nico is going to steal 80% of the remaining power and then gain half of that back for herself. So very useful in high passive power gain matchups, because it's going to enable you to more frequently use your own specials, keep that buff immunity active, or even consistently push yourself back up to the special 2 and apply additional poison debuffs. Alright folks, that's going to do it for another quick champion guide. I sincerely hope it was helpful for you, and if you enjoyed it, please let me know by hitting that like button. And if you've made it this far into the video, leave me a comment below that says there's a little witch in all of us. Be sure to share the video with your friends, with your alliance mates, anybody who just pulled Nico, maybe is struggling to figure out how to use her. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.